But we begin tonight with a question that's top of mind for all of us right now. What happens next in the Maricopa audit? Now that we know for a fact, even with some evidence still outstanding, the state of Arizona was not a close race at all. Decided not by a mere 10,457 votes, but rather tens of thousands of not votes per se, but ballots. Of course, as auditors presented the evidence they have so far at Thursday's Arizona Senate hearing, they posed some questions that even they do not have the answers for as of yet, which leaves us with even more. So let's go through the numbers, starting with the smallest discrepancy, which is actually quite significant, 3,981. Now, last year, Secretary of State Katie Hobbs requested that Arizonans be able to register to vote all the way up to Election Day. But when that case was lost in the courts and the registration cutoff date got moved back to October 15th, guess what happened?
Registration information that we found in the voter rolls. We have 3,981 individuals who show as having voted in this election, and their data shows up in the canvas as having voted in this election. However, they were registered after October 15th.
Okay, so based on the law, those ballots should obviously not have been counted. And then there's a question of 11,326 that just magically appeared out of thin air. Not on November 3rd or even on the November 7th voter rolls, but rather on the December 4th version, which shows somehow, abracadabra, they actually still voted on November 3rd.
Logical explanation why that would be?
I cannot think of a logical explanation on what that would be. But it'd be a great thing to hear back from the county to see if there's anything that we're not thinking of.
Honestly, what other explanation could there be? Then something is terribly wrong here. This is not a handful of people we're talking about. This is 11,326. But it's not only voters making a miraculous appearance, it's also mail-in ballots. In fact, alakazam, 74,243 to be exact.
Be clear, here in the state of Arizona, there's EV32s and EV33s. EV32s is supposed to give a record of when a mail-in ballot is sent, and an EV33 is supposed to give a record of when the mail-in ballot is received. And so there should be an equal, there should be more EV32s, more sent out than there are that are received. Specifically with these, we can tie them to a specific individual that was mailed to. And so we have 74,000 where we have them came back from individuals where we don't have a clear indication that they were ever sent out to them.
And then there's the case of not voters and ballots appearing out of thin air, but rather voters actually disappearing. Poof, numbering in a total of 18,000.
20,000, I think it was about actually closer to 18,000 who voted in the election and then showed as being removed from the voter rolls soon after the election. So they were on the voter rolls, they showed as voted, and then they were removed. And there could be a good logical explanation for that, but it seems like a large number to immediately have after an election be removed.
Now all of these numbers alone add up to 107,550. But those are only the hard numbers we know of. There's so much we still don't know, like why the serial numbers on thousands of duplicated ballots are missing or faded. And as Karen Fann asked Senate Liaison Ken Bennett, how we ever find out how many times they were counted.
If the corresponding numbers aren't on there, how would you know whether it was duplicated once or 10 times?
You wouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Unless you meticulously kept track of the total number in each group, which I think Doug's organization has done.
And of course, we all now want to know about Sharpiegate, as the lamestream media like to call it. Do you remember that? When we heard stories of poll workers handing out Sharpies to voters, which potentially could have impacted how the ballots were read? Well, we're finally getting answers on that front as well.
On their website said that they only use secure paper, which does not allow for bleed through. Correct?
Correct. This is actually a newsletter from them, but yes.
Okay, their newsletter. And so if that is correct, there is no way there would be bleed through as what we're seeing on the ballots.
Yeah, based on our discussions with paper experts, they specifically state that paper is thick enough that it wouldn't bleed through, and we are seeing a lot of very thin paper stock being utilized, especially on Election Day.
And by the way, ballots aside, Why are we just learning about the fact that there was a breach of Maricopa County's registration server in November? A fact the county shared privately with select voters and yet never bothered to share with the greater public.
Registration server that was public facing did have unauthorized access to that. In cybersecurity terms, it was breached. We know that the county has accepted that as an unauthorized breach because they actually issued a letter to a small subset of the voters who were affected by that breach, and they issued that in January of 2021.
Joining us now with more on Thursday's hearing, Arizona Senate President Karen Fann. First of all, Karen, thank you for holding these hearings yesterday so we could see the evidence. I know it's partial evidence so far. What are the next steps now that they've given you things that they still need? What are you all doing to make that happen?
That was a good question. Thanks for having me on. It's been frustrating. You would think that a county that wants to make sure that their elections are safe and secure, they would be actually helping us instead of withholding information. The auditors have done a tremendous job despite all the barriers and problems that they have had to encounter with Maricopa County right now. We have gotten to a point where 2 and 2 is not adding up to 4. And that's all we're doing is asking for Maricopa County to sit down at the table with us and help explain these anomalies, help us understand why 2 and 2 is not adding to 4 right now. So there is options on the table. We'll be talking with our attorneys about this next week, the possibility of issuing new subpoenas, going back to court. The public would be hugely helpful in this to they're elected officials. They are supposed to be representing their voters and constituents. So if maybe they hear from more of their voters to say, why aren't you helping? Why don't you want to get the right answers? Maybe we can move this thing forward, but it's definitely not adding up right now.
And who in Maricopa County specifically should voters contact to make sure that they actually respond to you all?
The Board of Supervisors. The chairman is Jack Sellers.
Right.
The past chairman is Clint Hickman. So anybody there at the Board of Supervisors, Stephen Richer is the recorder, the county recorder. Any one of them could sure step up at any given time and say, let's sit down and walk through this and let's see if we can find some answers.
So how soon? So next week you said you're going to start meeting with your lawyers about this. How soon do you think then the next step can get started? Because, of course, we all wanted to see the results by August, but because they're stonewalling this, could it take even longer?
It possibly could, because the longer they wait, the harder it is to tie these numbers together. Here's what the true disturbance is. So based on the information we have, there's a lot that we can ascertain so far, as was disclosed yesterday. Then at this point, they will take all of this information back to the labs and they will start doing a lot of analysis on these sorts of things. So we will be able to get a lot of definitive answers, but if we don't get this additional information, there's always going to be those questions out there about the machines being hacked. We know that there was a breach in November. They admitted it. They sent letters to voters saying, we know that we were hacked. So why they wouldn't want to work with us is just beyond me right now. But the longer they stay up, the longer they delay from helping us, I think the worse it looks for them because it just looks like they're trying to hide something.
And I want to ask you about Wendy Rogers' statement, because based on this evidence so far, you're talking about at least over 100,000 votes or ballots that were not correct, were not following protocol. Are you talking with the senators about actually recalling those electors, not saying to give them to either Biden or Trump, but simply to recall them since that statement, signed again under penalty of perjury, wouldn't have been correct that the governor and secretary of state signed off on November?
So the Senate body, we do not have that authority to do that. So this is what we have said, and I want to make this very clear on the record. We as the Senate body we have the ability to subpoena information because we make laws, and we're entitled to have that information to determine how to write those laws. That's why we have been successful in court, and that's what we're doing. It's all about election integrity. It's not about the Trump-Biden race. It's not about the Kelly Martha McSally race. Are we auditing those numbers? Yes, because that's part of the audit. But this is about election integrity. So what we need to do is find the facts to determine were the procedures followed correctly? Was there any irregularities? Was there any intentional fraud there? If in case that is, we have an obligation to change our rules, fix our rules to make sure it doesn't happen again. And our obligation is, if we find fraud, to turn that over to our Attorney General's office and to our congressional members, and they will be the ones that will handle not only criminal charges if necessary, but they will be able to determine what the next path forward is as far as was this election a fair election or not.
So you're saying there's no way for the Senate, because I think a lot of people's understanding with this audit was that we were looking at 2020 because if things went wrong, we at least needed to fix it. So you're saying there's nothing that the Senate is planning to do to make right in what happened in November, to fix this on the record. Again, not saying award it to anyone, but not letting that record stand if you know it's incorrect.
We as a Senate body do not have the constitutional authority to recall those.
Who would then? Would it be the Attorney General, you're saying, if there was a criminal? Or you're saying there's no way, if there's cheating, there's just nothing we can do about it? Is that what you're saying, unless we write laws?
I am not saying there is no way it can be done. What I'm saying is that our Senate body does not have the authority to do it. However, we will turn that over to the Attorney Generals, not only the state level, but on the federal level, and we will turn it over to Congress. And they can make those decisions. And that is, I'm saying, if there were any wrongdoings. It could be that we might just find a lot of irregularities in the sense that there were problems with the votes. But if those determinations show that there was enough difference in account of the electoral, particularly since it was such a small margin here, as it was in some other states, then Congress is going to have to take care of that. They are going to have to make those decisions. This has never happened, to my knowledge, in the history of America. So I don't think there is any precedent set for it at this point.
So, and just so I understand, just real quick, because I know we're coming up against a hard break. So you're saying the Attorney General would have to investigate, and then would he submit that, you're saying, to Congress, and then Congress would act on it? Because so you're saying the Senate can't recall, even though they have the ability to recall those electors?
We do not have the ability to recall those electors at this point.
So Congress, you're saying, would? They could if they saw your evidence?
There has never been precedence on this, so I'm not sure how they would handle it, but we would turn it over to them because they would have to determine that form of action.
Okay, well, thank you for explaining it. Again, like I said, we want to fix it, obviously, for the future. But for people who knew how they voted in the last election, it's hard to just sweep this under the rug because we're all stuck with living this for the next 4 years, and there have to be consequences. Elections have consequences. We haven't seen consequences yet for 2020. Thank you. Keep us posted, especially with the lawsuit next week, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
We will. Thank you so much.
Okay, I just want to summarize Arizona. You got 70,000 more ballots received and requested. You have 10,000 voters added to the rolls after Election Day that cast a ballot in 2020. You have election servers that were hacked during the election. You have remote access that was available. You have all access logs wiped on 11 March 2021. You have original and duplicate ballots were not marked and cannot be verified. And the number of votes certified does not match the number of ballots sent to the audit.